Hello everyone, so we are looking at the skill acquisition lesson plan, and today we are focusing on D1 analysis of tasks and methods of presenting skills. By the end of today, we need to accumulate information to be applied in this box and therefore completing the D1 task. So, as we know, we are now on Learning Aim D, carrying out teaching and learning strategies for sports skills. So teaching and learning can be affected by a number of different situations and strategies. And all of these different types of learning and teaching theories will assist you in the way that you go about planning to teach your performers. Part of teaching and learning is knowing the best and most effective way of presenting your information to the people you're coaching. So we need to start to understand how we can present that information. So the first thing we need to do is think about analysis of task and how we analyze. Analysis of task can be broken down into complex and simple, the number of parts of the actual skill, and the performer's skill level. And at this point, we've spoken about differentiation and how we can use differentiation to impact individual performers in a larger group setting so that every individual makes progress. So how can the 3 bullet points above affect teaching of a skill? It might be a nice opportunity to pause the slides, have a think, and then press play when you are ready. So complex and simple, or complex or simple, is an easy way to define the skills. So we know skills can be easily divided up into their component parts, and those that are easily divided up into their component parts are known as simple skills. And those that are more difficult to break up into component parts are often referred to as complex skills. So the complex skills may need more in-depth and detailed coaching. So in the past, we've been through skill classification, use our knowledge from skill classification at this point. Numbers of parts is very similar to complex and simple. So skills can also be broken down into skills can also be broken down by the number of parts they contain when they are delivered. As a rule of thumb, the more component parts a skill contains, the more complex the skill is likely to be. So something that has very low amount of component parts is often referred to as a simple skill. And then we've got the performer skill level. As we mentioned earlier, it is important for a tutor or a coach to understand the performer's own skill level, both in terms of what they are capable of achieving and what they've already achieved. So in our group, who are our more able performers and who might need support? And we need to work with those students. So in terms of the D1 box, we need to complete what complete, complex and simple mean, what the number of parts mean, and how that affects your teaching. And how does the performer's skill level affect how you're about to present your information? At this point, I would use your own research as well as Pearson's textbook to guide your content for that box. Okay, so we move on to the methods of presenting skills. With regards to presenting skills, if any of you consider going into coaching or teaching, this is a hot topic that's often discussed throughout your time at universities or in your careers. And we fluctuate between them depending on the tasks that we are actually coaching or the group that we are coaching. So the decision of which method is best depends on a number of factors. These can include things like the personality of the learner, the level of ability of the performer, the facilities and time available to you as the coach or the teacher, the size and the structure of your teaching group. So we can think about things like how old are the group, what is their physical fitness, and potentially what gender are they. So there's a number of different factors that help us to make this decision. So we've got the part method, the whole method, progressive part method, and the whole part whole. At this point, you can see that I've given you some evaluative tools with both advantages and disadvantages for you to read through. Do that now, please. Pause the slide, and once you are ready to move forward, press play again. So the part method, this identifies subroutines of any skill. The performer learns, practices, and perfects each component before moving on to the next, and eventually is able to complete the whole skill. So really breaking down the skills into component parts, perfecting one part of it before we move on to the next. The whole method, again, advantages and disadvantages. Pause the slide now. The whole method is where the complete skill is demonstrated and the performer learns it as one complete movement. So, for example, a demonstration of a tennis serve, and then the performer has a go at completing the tennis serve. Whereas in contrast, the part method might be that we focus on throwing the ball up and then catching it again, and then throwing the ball up and hitting it, and then throwing the ball up and hitting it in the right direction, etc., with regards to the tennis serve. Progressive part and whole part whole. So progressive part, this involves an initial experience of the skill that then permits a mental picture to be created for the performer of what the skill involves. So effectively, if a skill can be broken down into, let's say, 5 parts, the performer would go about learning it in this way. So we have our 5 parts. The performer would learn part 1 and perfect it. Then they would learn part 2 and perfect it. And then the performer would put parts 1 and 2 together and perfect it. Then they would move on to part 3. Then they would move on to putting parts 1, 2, and 3 together. Once they've perfected that, they move on to part 4, perform parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, learn part 5, and then eventually they've got to the stage where they can perfect 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the skill. And then we've got whole part whole. Whole part whole is similar to part method, but involves an initial introduction or demonstration of the skill before it's broken down into its component parts. This is something that's quite popular at universities, particularly at the moment, and is quite often used in coaching outside of educational environments, so with football teams, with basketball teams, netball teams, etc. This is one that I often enjoy using. So to give you an example, you may attend a PE lesson, and at the start of that lesson, we might highlight something that we're going to be working on. So, okay, we're going to start off with a game of football, and in this game of football, the idea is that you need to create 5 passes before you can score a goal, and the focus of the lesson is going to be passing. Once we've had that whole experience of the passing in the game, we can identify what are the potential errors in our passing technique, and then stop the game and develop some skills around those specific errors that are happening in our game, particularly to do with passing. So we might run a few passing drills that hope to correct any errors. And then at the end of the lesson, we're going to go back into that whole situation of the game and put in practice what we've just developed. So again, you can see there's a whole, the initial game, we break it down into the part, the skill that we focus on, and then we finish up with the whole game, hopefully identifying that we've made progress. So when teaching, you now need to think about what skills you are going to use, what method you're going to use, and complete D1. You need to give me information about each of the areas. So I need to understand on my lesson plan how we analyze a task. What are the different methods of presenting skills? Can you give me strengths and weaknesses of each? And then highlight which one you plan to use in your lesson when we return. Thanks very much.